Sometimes life's greatest lessons come from those who seem the weakest. Once upon a time, in a peaceful village surrounded by vast meadows and clear streams, there lived a kind-hearted shepherd who owned a loyal but aging sheepdog named Rusty. Rusty had been the pride of the shepherd's farm for many years. When he was young, strong, and full of energy, Rusty would race across the fields, keeping the flock safe from wolves and guiding them home before sunset. His sharp bark and quick legs made him a hero among the sheep. But as the years passed, Rusty grew old. His legs were no longer as fast, his eyes not as sharp, and his bark had grown weaker. The shepherd, though grateful for Rusty's years of service, allowed him to live freely without demanding work. Rusty spent his days lying under the shade of the big oak tree near the pasture, watching the flock graze peacefully. One breezy afternoon, as Rusty wandered further than usual in search of a cool spot to rest, he slipped near the edge of a dried-up riverbank. Before he could steady himself, he tumbled down into a deep pit that had been hidden by tall grass. The walls of the pit were steep and smooth, making it nearly impossible for the old dog to climb out. Rusty barked and barked, hoping someone would hear his cries. Hours passed, and finally, a farmer's son walking by heard the faint sound. Curious, the boy followed the noise until he discovered Rusty at the bottom of the pit, panting heavily and looking desperate. Alarmed, the boy rushed back to the village to tell the shepherd what had happened. When the shepherd heard the news, his heart sank. He quickly called upon his neighbors to help rescue Rusty. Together, they hurried to the pit, carrying ropes, ladders, and whatever tools they could find. The villagers admired Rusty, for he had protected their fields and their sheep countless times in the past. They were determined to save him. They tried lowering a rope for Rusty to hold with his teeth, but his strength was too weak to hold on. They tried placing a wooden plank inside, but it kept slipping. Hours of effort passed, but nothing seemed to work. The villagers grew weary, and the shepherd, torn between his love for Rusty and the harshness of reality, began to think of a painful decision. Rusty was old. Even if they rescued him, he would no longer be the strong guardian he once was. The pit was too deep, and no solution seemed possible. With a heavy heart, the shepherd finally sighed and said, "Perhaps it's time to let him go. He's lived a long life. Instead of letting him suffer, maybe it's better to cover the pit and give him peace." The villagers, though saddened, respected the shepherd's decision. Reluctantly, they picked up shovels and began to throw dirt into the pit. At first, Rusty froze in fear. Each pile of dirt that hit his back made him realize what was happening. His beloved master had given up on him. His heart ached, and tears welled in his tired eyes. But after a few moments of despair, something inside Rusty shifted. A spark of resilience, buried deep in his loyal heart, awakened. Instead of lying still and accepting his fate, Rusty shook the dirt off his back. Each time the villagers threw more soil, he shook it off and stepped onto the growing mound beneath his paws. At first, the villagers didn't notice. They thought Rusty's cries had simply faded. But little by little, the old dog was rising. With every shovel of dirt, he lifted himself higher. What was meant to bury him became his stepping stone to climb out. His body ached, his legs trembled, but his spirit burned stronger than ever. Finally, when the villagers paused to rest, the shepherd leaned over to see how much dirt had filled the pit. To his astonishment, he saw Rusty standing proudly, his paws steady on the mound of soil. With one last effort, Rusty leapt upward and scrambled over the edge, landing safely on the grass. The crowd gasped in disbelief. The shepherd's eyes filled with tears. Rusty, the dog he had nearly given up on, had saved himself through determination and courage. Though exhausted and dirty, Rusty wagged his tail, standing tall as if to say, "I am not finished yet." The villagers cheered, patting Rusty gently and praising his incredible will to survive. The shepherd knelt beside him, ashamed of his decision to abandon his loyal friend. He stroked Rusty's fur and whispered, "Forgive me, old boy. You've shown me that strength doesn't come from youth, but from spirit." From that day on, Rusty became a living symbol of resilience for the entire village. Children who felt small or weak would look at him and remember that giving up was never the answer. Farmers who faced bad harvests would think of Rusty and remind themselves to turn their struggles into stepping stones. And the shepherd, who once doubted his old companion, never again underestimated the value of those who seemed worn or past their prime. Rusty spent his remaining years peacefully, not as a forgotten old dog, but as a legend whose story inspired everyone. His tale spread from village to village, reminding people that even when life tries to bury us under problems, we can shake them off and rise higher. The moral of the story is that life will often throw dirt on you, problems, doubts, and challenges meant to bury your spirit. But just like Rusty, you have the power to shake it off and use it as a step to rise above. Never let others decide your worth, and never give up when life gets hard. The very obstacles meant to hold you down can become the path that lifts you up. True strength is not about age, wealth, or power. It is about resilience, self-belief, and the courage to keep climbing until you reach the light.